On this episode of AV Week, LG's got new eSport monitors, Microsoft Office 365 had a massive outage, and Avixa's got a diversity presentation call. All this and more on this episode of AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 476, Sharing Their Stories.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Extron, industry-leading technology backed by world-class support.
And by
Peerless AV, driving technology through innovation.
This is AV Week, your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the commercial AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott, filling in for our friend, Mr. Albright, for AVNation.tv. This week, I'm pleased to be joined by three of my favorite people. First, we have Ifat Chaudhry. She's a bid manager at CDEC. How are you, ma'am?
I'm really well. Thank you very much for having me on board this week.
I'm so glad you're here. We chat a lot on Twitter, but I don't think we've run into each other directly yet. So I'm really happy you're here. Then we have Mr. Brock McGinnis. He is the principal at Evitas. How are you, sir?
Very well, and happy to be here with you, Matt. It's a nice change. We can tell Tim that.
We'll go with nice change, not a better change or a more appropriate change. Just a nice change.
It's a nice change.
I hope he listens to this so he hears it, but he
Shots
probably
fired.
doesn't. Yeah, of course, every day. That is my good friend Chrissy Spurlock. She is an AV specialist. How you doing, Chrissy?
Doing good. Excited to be here.
I am so glad everyone is here. Let's kick this story off. This show off with a story that comes to us from AV Network. LG has unveiled some gaming monitors for esports. It's a commercial version of their LG Ultra Gear series, which is the #1 ranked gaming monitor in the consumer market. I wanted to start with you on this. Esports has been a huge buzzword for quite a while. The last couple of years, you're seeing universities get into it. You're seeing, obviously, LG playing heavily into that vein. Where does esports fit into the pro AV space, into the commercial AV space? Is it just the arenas and kind of the educational teams that have gone after esports, or is there a broader, more involved sector there?
I think we're seeing a change this year across so much pro AV, especially where people are at home and actually want to have the same experience because they can't get out to those venues. And certainly in the UK, we're seeing, in terms of gaming monitors, I haven't seen the LG actually, but I have 2 children who are teenagers and absolutely love gaming. And they want to know that they've got the best monitors and have that best experience. So I actually can see that where pro AV, it has been successful. I think it's the home market that's going to see more of it because people have got more time to engage and they want to have that quality of experience. And I can actually, all the kids in our family they spend about 6-7 hours every evening. The rest of us are asleep. They go to bed as I get up, and that's across cousins and all ages. And they are all gaming at home all night. So it's kind of it's brought that experience. It's made it more accessible. So it'll be interesting to see the price points for where LG are going. And but certainly, I think that's where they're going here. Certainly.
Very good, Brock. I know from kind of some previous conversations that you and I have had that you've been heavily involved in esports over the last couple of years. When these first started in the kind of arena setting, it was rent out your local up here Cineplex, theater for a birthday party, and you can play Xbox or PS4 or 3 at the time on the big screen. That's kind of changed dramatically, I would assume. How do people have to approach this differently when they start talking about the arena space for esports?
Well, it doesn't matter if an arena is 20,000 seats or 2,000 seats or a cinema auditorium. You're talking about multiple audiences. There's an in-person audience and there's an online audience, and there's also a future audience because these are recorded to be played back on demand. Technically, you're dealing with home technology, which is the gaming console itself. You're marrying that in with audiovisual technology, which is taking all those images and putting them on big screens within the venue, and mixing that with player microphones, with commentator microphones, and then on top of that, you're adding a layer of broadcast technology because you're switching multiple cameras, multiple audio input sources. You're doing it at 59.9. You're not doing it at 60 hertz, and Chrissy can probably talk to that technical element better than I can. We built our first 26 auditoria in 24 different cinemas. Permanently installed systems that would accommodate 12 gamers. And they were having, the particular cinema company was having monthly $50,000 prize pool tournaments. If you won regionally or locally, you got to go regional. If you won regionally, you got to go nationally. And I'm not sure if there wasn't at one point $1 million prize, and some of it was first-person shooter games, and some of it was actually esports. Mm-hmm. They were playing Madden this and FIFA that, and from a technical perspective, early in the evolution of it, it was fascinating because you had amateur users, you had occasional operators, which is not necessarily professionals that did this. Unlike the shows in the arenas where you're bringing in a broadcast crew, mm-hmm. You're bringing in an AV crew, you're bringing in a lighting crew. It's a spectacular event. But in these cinemas, you have some folks that are kind of hired for the event locally. They're different ones. The systems have to be easy to operate. They have to be bulletproof. And they all have to be in sync because there's a big image behind the players. The players are up on a stage, and this was one of the first technical things that came across. And Chrissy is smiling. I should let you start talking about this, but the frame on that cinema screen had to be exactly the same frame that is on the player monitor because it is being reflected in the player monitor, and you cannot distract these people. As Ifat said, her family are amateurs. These are professionals. They're playing all day, every day, have reflexes the likes of which I've never seen. Poor personal hygiene for the most part, but that's okay. Was your question, where does AV fit in this?
Sure.
Many of us call ourselves integrators. And this was one of the greatest integration tasks we ever took on. Consumer technology, AV technology, broadcast technology. Oh, and I forgot. This was in a cinema auditorium, or 26 of them, being broadcast over cinema sound and video, which is a whole different world. So yeah, and it's way cool and way interesting. I got to think these LG products are probably for studios, at colleges and universities where there may be 20 people each, sitting at desks, because I think the largest one was only 38 inches.
Yes.
But I have someone at home who'd really like a 240 hertz, 1 millisecond refresh monitor. In case anybody at LG is listening.
Yes. So that's Brock McGinnis.
Oh,
Chrissy, I know they know you. Everyone knows you. Chrissy, the thing that caught my eye with this is in my company, we do commercial and residential. And one of the first times that we brought true commercial gear into a residential environment was for a semi-pro gamer. And this is back 8-9 years ago, and trying to find, the proper monitor for this kid so he could game, which at the time I thought was ridiculous, but trying to put an actual like reference monitor in for him and get gigabit internet up to his room was just the oddest thing in the world for me. How do integrators that don't really play in this space, because this is not, to Brock's point, this is not just an offshoot anymore. This is its own vertical. This is its own thing. How do integrators that aren't used to having to deal with 1 millisecond refresh rates get into this and get the knowledge skill required to actually pull this off properly?
That's a great question. And I think it starts with really reversing the original question from, how does esports fit into Pro AV, and switch that around to say, how does Pro AV service the esports? It's going to be a bigger conversation as this whole switch in our society changes. I think the first thing, though, is research. To your point, I actually still struggle to this day, being in my old niche of really high-end stadium installs. I'll have friends call and ask, what do you recommend for this home system? What do you recommend for my man cave, she cave? And I'm like, okay, well, and I give them all this recommendation for things that are over, 35 grand. And I have to think, hold on, I have to go and do actual research because I don't have all of that off the top of my head. So it's really figuring out what the customer needs are, which I know we've heard this before, but what used to work just doesn't work anymore in that market. And we have to find out what is needed. I was actually kind of dreaming about the Tony Stark house, where he walks in and he's got panels here and panels there and panels there, and they're all connected to his server room downstairs, and he can just look at his screen and talk to it, and it brings up what he needs to see. That is not too far away from us in our industry right now. So I would like to see some intentional market research that's maybe a little bit more public and share that conversation and find out what people are looking for. And we also need, as consumers, they also need to know what they're looking for. Niche people are hard to find who are willing to talk about what their needs are. So how are we going to reach that market? And I say that we start with the conversation like this.
Hey, thanks for watching the first segment of this week's episode. To catch the entire show, please click the link below or visit avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.